not necessarily generosity.
So your contribution to the financial independence of those that are in need and caring for the poor and stuff like that, that's something we want to be doing. We want to be considerate of the effect of our actions on other people around people. We don't want people into gangs and prostitution and things like that, because we don't want to be responsible for that. What does our boss want? Okay, yes. So what's our next thing? What are some alternatives that we could do in this situation? As the person that did the report, did the audit, what are some of the things that you could do?
Seek legal counsel.
You could seek legal counsel personally or on behalf of the company?
On behalf of the company.
Yes.
Just like what to do, like what you could do for them in terms of like human rights and that kind of stuff. Oh hey.
Hey John. Hey, what's that like? Go. Goodbye. See you guys.
Yes.
Okay. Usually Robin and Kim are here, but yeah. So yeah, everyone. Like seek legal, like in terms of like human rights and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, so you could seek a legal opinion for the business on whether they'll be in trouble for doing that. Yeah, so you probably getting the legal advice is a good idea. To help you, that might help you guide you, because if it rules out some alternative options, that'll be clear. What other things? What are some other options that you have? So with the report that you've done, you could either bury it and lose it. That's one option. Or you could send it to the newspaper. That's another option. What else you could report it. So with our report, we can lose our report, pretend we didn't know. We can take it to the board of the organisation and say, you guys have got a problem and you need to fix it.
Yeah.
Make it the board's problem. You could go to the newspaper and tell them what you found out, and that your boss is trying to cover it up and make a sensational 60 minutes expose on corruption and charities and stuff like that. So some options, these are some alternatives that we could do. What else could we do? We could quit the company and walk away. Yeah. So these are some of our options. Okay, now what compared to our principles, seeking legal advice is our first step, but at some point you're going to do something else. But seeking legal advice makes sense. It aligns up with honesty, aligns up with being in line with what government wants and stuff like that. Losing the report and pretending you didn't know. What principles does that help you with? What principles does it contradict? Integrity is not really high on that one, right? So that's got a X across for integrity. But that's what your boss wants you to do.
It's called covering up the truth.
Yeah, right. So integrity doesn't like that, right? But your boss likes it, so it's got a tick for submission to your boss. It's got a tick for it benefits the kids, that your customers. It's got a tick for your customers.
Also benefits your business.
And your business, that's right, yeah. Now, it's got a question mark, because at the moment we don't know. If we were to make a scene about this and do something about it, we don't know the effect of how it would affect the people, the children in those factories. We don't know whether it's going to be good or bad for them, and that's just one of our, I guess that's our complication. So it's got for the child workers, we really don't know how it's going to affect them. Okay. Going to the board.
Pretty solid.
Pretty solid. That's got a tick for integrity, theoretically, because you're not hiding it. You're making the people that have the power to do something about it known. Your boss isn't going to like you, but too bad because you've gone above him. What happens to the business, that depends on the board. So in a way, you're passing responsibility in some way for the next step, but that's probably a fair call because you don't have the capacity to make the full picture. Informing the board, assuming there is a board, is on the business itself. You don't know what's going to end up with that, but you're not going to get in trouble with the government because you've notified the board. And so, depending on the board, what will happen next? Going to the newspaper, making an expose, going public with the story.
What, without approval of your boss?
Yeah, bypassing the boss and going to try and force the company into doing something. Integrity is not going to, it's not going to be very good for integrity as far as your relationship with the company and everyone, right? So the boss is not happy. You'll probably lose your job, yeah, I guarantee you.
Probably no positives to that.
No positives in that at all, except the only time you might think about doing that is if the board also say they're going to bury it, and if no one wants to know, that might be, and you think the effect on the child workers is really bad, then the only reason you do that is to raise the profile of this child slavery in third world countries, whatever. So you might think, actually, we can't just stand by and pretend we're doing a good thing when we're doing a bad thing. So that would be the only time you might be able to say. Quitting your job and walking away is pretty similar to that one, I guess. So if the board said didn't want to know, you might quit rather than endangering the work that the organisation is doing. Well, I realise you're supplying clothes to kids, and that's a good thing, but I can't be a part of the bad thing that's going on, so I'm going to bail. I'm going to walk away. That might be an option to maintain your personal integrity and leave the judgment from God that's going to come against this organisation. I'm out of it. It's not going to affect me. Maybe. Okay, so that's consider the consequences. Then you've got to make a decision, and then you're going to start again and look at it again after you've been to the board and you've heard their response back. Then you've got to make the whole round of decision again. And let's see what they're going to say next. Cool. Okay. Today's session is going to be vaccine ethics, so COVID ethics. I called it COVID ethics. Vaccine ethics sounds cool, right? That sounds more controversial. So today I wanted to talk about, because it's the big thing of this year, I thought we should talk about some of the stuff that's going on with COVID in Australia and around the world. Because it's very divisive. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. There's a whole lot of very conflicting opinions, polarization of people and stuff like that. I thought we should look at what are some facts, what are some correct and appropriate responses for disciples of Jesus, and are there some responses that are inappropriate? In the same way, when we did medical ethics a couple of weeks ago, the ethics committee, looking at Ocean's case, said it would be ethically supportable to proceed with treatment, and it could be ethically supportable to just proceed with palliative care treatment, but not trying to cure. But it would not be ethically supportable to say, let's just do herbal remedies. So that was what they came up with, a couple of options that yes, the ethical committee could endorse either of these two, but this one off the table as being supportive. So I thought we should look at what are some of the things, because there's so many different things going on, what are some of the opinions that are floating around the universe at the moment about COVID, about lockdowns, about what are some of the things you've heard, interesting points of view. Obviously, we've got the current one is the vaccine is a big deal. People have all sorts of opinions about vaccines and whether it should be mandatory or not. Right, this is what's hot thing right now. Some opinions and perspectives on vaccine, on the vaccine. What have you heard?
It's not trying to test.
It's not tested. So people are saying it's not tested, yes? What else are people saying?
We don't know what's actually good.
It's coercion.
Coercion, making it mandatory, it's coercion, yeah. And that's a bad thing, is what you're saying? And you're saying that's a bad thing or a good thing? Coercion.
That's a bad thing,
Coercion.
because if it's going to get somebody's conscience, which we're talking about,
Yeah.
that's not a good thing.
Yeah. So whose conscience will be telling them not to have the vaccine?
Who's what?
Whose conscience? What sort of person's conscience is going to be saying don't get vaccinated?
Well, it's anybody, if you don't feel that that's safe and it hasn't been tested,
Yeah.
and so you're put into a position of where you don't feel comfortable with that there.
Yeah.
And so you actually are like, well, no, this is not right. And for example, I actually don't feel it's right. I went and got the AstraZeneca
Yeah.
first shot.
Yeah.
I actually cried the night before, and I
Yeah.
gave it to God and I said, God, this is not something I want to do.
Yeah.
I feel really uncomfortable doing this. And I don't agree with it because I know it has been tested. There's a full testing procedure that comes about with vaccinations. And when you look at those procedures, the procedures for any of the vaccines with COVID have not met any of those standards.
Yes.
So for me, that's just not
Okay.
a safe thing for me to do.
Yes.
know, so yeah.
And so you did it because you have to for work?
Sorry?
You did it because the government says you have to keep your business,
Yeah,
right?
because I would say no straight away. I mean, I went in and when it's, what makes it worse is you've got to fill out a form and it says, do you consent? I said, no, I don't consent. But you can't, there's no.
Too bad if you don't, that's right, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's not, I'm going against, they're making me consent for something that I don't consent.
Yes, yeah.
So that's wrong, that's clearly wrong.
So, this conscience thing, do you think you're sinning by having the vaccine? Do you think you're sinning by getting the vaccine?
If somebody chooses to get the vaccine, then no, they're not sinning.
Okay, so you think you're being forced into sinning by getting the vaccine?
I think it's like when we talk about conscience,
Yeah,
right, and what we talked about in past ethics, like you're pushing yourself to a degree that you don't agree to want to go and do that.
yes,
It's not right for me to do this, and I feel uncomfortable to do this. Even so much so, the second jab, I'm still fighting that within my own spirit.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
still like a real big issue for me.
Okay, so I would make, because this has come up early, I'll make the point, Romans 16, Romans 13, whatever, when it talks about conscience, okay, I think it's slightly different to being coercion into vaccine, because the whole point of that is, it's all talking about someone, it's talking about things that you think are sin, right? So I think that smoking cigarettes is sin, but the people at the church down the road don't think smoking cigarettes is sin, right? And they tell me, hey, let's go smoking. And I'm like, hold on a minute, but smoking sin? No, it's not. It's all good, right? And so you're therefore pushing me to sin what I think is sin. Now, I don't think you think it's sinful. You just think it's unwise.
I think it's unwise, but I also feel dirty getting it.
Right, okay. So you more than just thinking it's a little bit risky, you actually feel like being polluted by the fact that someone's making you do it.
Because it's like, for example, I know if I'm eating these packet of chips, I actually feel guilty eating these packets of chips because I know it's not good for me.
Yes, yes.
And so I know I'm sinning against my own body. It's the
Right.
the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So, and it's the same how I feel with vaccination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the coercion thing, and okay, sinning against your body, fine. So yes. So with the conscience thing in the New Testament, that principle mainly applies where you are compelling or people to reluctantly do something that they think is a sin.
Yeah.
And I don't think many Christians think that getting the vaccine is a sin.
No.
Except for, have you heard about that the vaccine is the mark of the beast? Has anyone heard that?
Oh,
You've heard that?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so those people would think that getting the vaccine, you're going to lose your salvation, right? Okay, you've heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've heard that. What do you think of that conversation, that opinion?
I say no.
You say no. You say no. What you think they're off?
Yeah, I don't know where they
Yeah.
get that. but-
Where do they get, so whenever we have a meet someone with an opposing point of view, we've got to understand where they got their opinion from.
I do understand where they get it from, because it talks about in the end times, that, you know, you won't be able to buy.
You can't buy or sell.
You talk about, and that's what kind of what they're doing at the moment. So
Yes,
you can't have a job, which means you can't provide for your family.
Yes.
You can't buy or sell.
so there's a close link because of the buy or sell thing, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
So, and look, and yeah, so that's where they get that, and that's another reason why I don't like the vaccine of mandate, because we're now taking people's livelihood, good citizens.
Yep, yep.
Good citizens who are actually good to society, and they're being punished for not doing anything wrong.
Yep, yes, so we'll come back, well, maybe we should come back to this mandatory thing, because this is obviously the big thing right now, is should it be mandatory or not, and there's a lot of conflict about that, so we can think about that. So when if you met someone who thought it was the mark of the beast, and you want to help them,
Well, I would even suggest that, obviously, it's a biblical thing.
yes,
But there's a few steps before the mark of the beast.
okay, tell me more.
The timeline of Revelation and all that kind of stuff. I don't believe that it is time to mark the beast. I don't know if there's any like signs or anything before the mark of the beast.
Okay, so-
Well versed in terms of end timeline.
Yeah,
But I don't know if that's
so,
something you could argue.
yeah, as a brief, you haven't done the New Testament class, we talked about the mark of the beast. Have you done New Testament class?
No,
Yeah, have you done the New Testament class where we talked about Revelation and the mark of the beast? The worldview class? We talked
no,
about-
I'm actually talking about that. at the moment.
Okay, so it's helpful. I did a bit of research and I found it, because this is all over the internet, right? If you look for it, it's the mark, there's a group of people that's the end times, it's the mark of the beast. COVID is the conspiracy theory, COVID is a planned depopulation of the earth, right?
Yeah, this is my mother.
Okay,
This is
yeah.
my mother.
Okay, and it's part of the end times destruction of the blah, 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 like mind control of the whole world, all that sort of thing, right? Okay, so let's talk, it's helpful if you actually understand what the New Testament was talking about for the mark of the beast. Everyone who followed the beast and worshipped his image, received a mark on their foreheads or on their hands. No one could buy or sell without the mark of the beast. Okay, and everyone who had the mark of the beast was outside the kingdom of God. This is the now, for step one, what the book of Revelation made sense to the people in the first century who were reading it, right? Okay, so when they read about the mark of the beast, they all knew what John was talking about. So if we can understand what John's talking about, we can get an idea of what the mark of the beast is. I'll drop a couple of hints. If I put my faith in Jesus for the forgiveness of my sin, right, and then I accidentally drink alcohol, am I going to lose my salvation? What can steal my salvation after I put my trust in Jesus? No. So it's either completely nothing, or if I'm on a different school of theological thought, and I think you're not once saved, always saved, but you can lose your salvation. Any idea what I might suggest is the ways you could lose your salvation? Renouncing Jesus. That's right. Renouncing Jesus.
Said, like, living in sin without repenting.
Yeah, unrepentant, defiant, willful sin, renouncing Jesus and turning away. Possibly, like some schools of theology will say, you know, if you turn your back on Jesus and you willfully renounce Christ, okay, you've turned your back on the grace of God, well, you're no longer in the kingdom, okay? So but no one anywhere says you can accidentally lose your salvation without realizing it, and it always has to have something to do with a choice about who are you following, who are you worshiping, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be a worship choice. You can't accidentally, I bought the wrong brand credit card and now I'm out of the kingdom of heaven because I had, like I say, remember when we were kids, it was credit cards with the mark of the beast, right? Remember that? You don't remember that.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
You don't, your mum remembers this, right? when we were kids, I remember we went to an evangelistic crusade, and it was Barry Smith in New Zealand, and he had this big timeline chart of the end times, and it had the mark of the beast 666, and the number of, you needed 18 numbers to make up. He talked about how credit cards were part of the first stage of a numbering system for everyone in the world, because credit cards are good, but the problem with the credit card is you can get it lost, it can be stolen, it can be forged, but if your credit card number was tattooed onto your hand with a laser tattoo, then you would you'll be fully identified for everyone. So you can buy or sell up the credit card, no one can steal it, no one can forge it, blah, blah. So it's this whole credit cards are taking us to mark of the beast. End times, you need to find Jesus now, okay? And it was funny because I remember after going to that conference, I worked at supermarket, and the week after we had the Barry Smith meeting, there's one of the pastors of my church coming in buying food with a credit card. And I'm like, hold on a minute. I just heard that evangelist say credit cards are the mark of the beast. Here I am. I'm now confused, right? What's going on? Anyway, the mark of the beast in the 1st century AD. What was the mark of the beast? Remember he says, if anyone has wisdom, let them calculate the number of his name, right?
Yeah.
His number is 666. What does 666 refer to in the book of Revelation? 666 refers to, now 666 refers to COVID now. You watch this. I just saw this online. This is amazing. COVID. C. Now every letter has a numerical equivalent in Hebrew, right? In English, C is the 3rd letter. O. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. 15. V. That's going to be like V, W, X, Y, Z. That's going to be 22, right? Something like that. I'm guessing I, 9. Yeah. D is 4. Add them all up. 18, 38, 40, 49, 53. That's not enough, right? Oh, you got to add 19 on that because it's COVID-19, right? So that makes 62. Probably that was 21. There's 5 letters in COVID. That makes 66. Something like that. You can get 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Somehow I saw a thing online. You can work out 666 from COVID-19.
No, you're better off saying.
Okay. Anyway,
you're better off saying COVID backwards, which is Divok, which is the Hebrew word of some.
Oh, okay, there's another one.
Yeah, you're
better
off saying that.
The point is,
I've seen that one.
You've seen that one?
As an example.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one.
Okay,
I'll tell you what the Hebrew word for COVID backwards, and then they use 91
it's
as
19.
Psalms 91.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so good, right?
You really want to look like.
Okay, the point of doing this is near in the 1st century, the Greek and Hebrew alphabets, right? They have numeric numbers for letters, right? All good Bible scholars know this. And 666, well, if you add it up, if you wrote Nero, Caesar, something like that, okay, and you added up those numbers, you got 666, right? Because every letter has and you added those numbers, name of Nero the emperor, right? The name of his letters added up to 666. Hey, Kumar. Good to see you, mate. We're just talking about Mark of the Beast right now, so you're welcome to join us. So, from your New Testament, he's just removing the mark right now. So, can you talk to us, Kumar? Have you got volume?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Can you remember from New Testament class what's the number of the beast and the mark of the beast and everything?
I just 666.
Yeah, I know. What does 666 come from?
I don't remember. You caught me off guard there, Garrett.
So Nero Caesar, right? His name.
Yes.
Add up the letters in Greek and you get 666, right? Okay. Now, when you bought all the Roman money, had Nero's image on it, right? You remember you have the emperor's face on the coins, right? So the image, okay, on the money, okay? When you went to join business societies and things to run a business, you had to participate in idol worship and emperor worship to be a part of the club, right? So to run a business in Nero's kingdom, you had to be a Nero worshipper. You had to use the money with his face on it. You had to sign up to emperor worship before you could join the business organizations like Rotary and stuff like that, right? Okay, so you couldn't operate in Nero's economy without being a Nero worshipper. Okay, so you had to operate successfully in Nero time. You had to be a Nero worshipper. You had to embrace his mark and worship his mark. You had to be a Nero worshipper. That was the mark of the beast in Revelation. Okay, that was the number of the beast and the mark, all that sort of thing. The beast always stands for an empire or a leader of an empire, beast, and Revelation and Daniel and something. So, getting the mark of the beast involved in allegiance, renouncing Christ, and rather, for the sake of financial gain, maybe, putting you and worshipping someone else. Right? It's about worshipping someone else other than Jesus, and maybe for the sake of financial gain or just to get through daily living. So, for a vaccine to be the mark of the beast, right, it would have to involve poor, weak Christian who's struggling to understand this and is confused on the internet. Okay, hostile person, no point having the conversation. Poor, weak Christian who's confused by this whole thing. Is it the mark of the beast? Am I going to lose my salvation if I get the vaccine? The mark of the beast has to involve allegiance and worship. You can't lose your salvation through a doctor's visit, right? It doesn't make sense that the blood of Jesus is so weak that if you go to the doctor and get an injection, suddenly you've lost your salvation. So that we can help someone, I would say subscribing to the thing that the vaccine is the mark of the beast is very bad theology, not appropriate for a Christian with any understanding, right? But there's heaps of them that are doing it and are right into it. Okay, so, and if we have someone who's open, we should be helping them understand what true scripture is. I was reading one of these chat things, and this guy had an article, and someone said, "No, this is what the mark of the beast is," and explained what I've just basically said. Okay, and there was the comments on it where some of the people, "Oh, this is so good. I wish I'd known this 10 years ago. Now I understand what the book of Revelation found. Thank you for sharing this." In others were, "You've been deceived by the Marxist. Okay, you'll burn with everyone else. Okay, you're a servant of darkness." And so obviously, right. If someone's got an open heart, you can read that.
Tag me.
So good, right? So if someone's got an open heart, good theology and Bible teaching will help them with this. Right? If they haven't got an open heart, you're wasting your time. But okay, so that's the mark of the beast thing. Is it a?
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Remember everything, prophecy and stuff. They understood it back then, right? And first you've got to find out what they understood. When you understand their perspective, and it makes a lot more sense. Okay, and if you know the history, you know every 5 years there's a new mark of the beast, right? Every time anything's happening on a global scale, it's the mark of the beast. It's the Antichrist. It's the end times. So every US president ever has always been
the Antichrist has to rise in order for that to be a mark of the beast.
possibly, but every US president ever has always been called the Antichrist by someone, right? The Pope's the Antichrist. Donald Trump was the Antichrist. George Bush was the Antichrist. Okay, they all get their Antichrist label at some point because that's another whole story, right? Another whole story. We can come back to another time. Okay, the whole vaccine thing. Yeah, yes, not tested. Being concerned about it not being tested is a fair, legitimate thing for any person, whether you're a Christian or not. Okay, and the only reason why has it not been tested? What do we think? What's the reason given that it hasn't been tested? The urgency, right? That's right. So the urgency.
EUA.
Emergency, yes, right. So you get an emergency dispensation that because of the crisis, we'll approve it even though we're really pending. Normally, like, oh, there's a new cancer treatment out. It's only got 20 years of testing, and then we'll be able to use it, right? That's the normal way they bring out stuff. But this year, 6 months is enough. We're ready to roll because
Could that be misinterpretation as well?
What's that?
Could it be misinterpretation
Misinterpretation of what?
of what data they're seeing in front of them? Because I think obviously, I think this is not the first thing which they called mark of the beast, because they're obviously that theology interlinked with what's coming out and what they're expecting. It's what's causing this scaremongering, if you want to call it that.
Oh, yes, when it comes to the mark of the beast,
Yeah,
people that are looking for it will see it in everything, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, don't step out of their house. The bus is the mark of the beast.
That's right. Yeah. So as far as why is the vaccine not tested? Why hasn't it been tested enough? Well, we understand that the position is that we haven't had time. So far, it looks good. It's pretty much, and if it wasn't a worldwide crisis, then we would make them wait 10 years to do proper testing. But we don't have that option, so we're rushing it through, hoping for the best. And so, yeah.
I understand you say that, Derek,
Yeah.
but you're rushing over that, but you haven't addressed the fact that even though they say that EUA,
Yeah.
there is other methods of being able to control the COVID.
Okay,
And
yes.
those are being brushed aside, they've been brushed aside, and just be aware, Greg Hunt, who actually stated, he goes, this is the first worldwide human, first worldwide human experimentation taken in a global sense.
Yes.
That his exact words came out. That's not exactly how he said it, but
Yeah.
very on that line. And that's pretty full on to say something like that. That's what, and I'm sorry that even when you bring it back to what happened in the time of Hitler, it was very much the same models which he was doing. So just to throw it out there, sayings like that, sayings like that is actually quite scary.
Yeah.
It's very, very scary.
Yes.
You know, and not only scary in that regard is that Scott Morrison, same thing, when he initially first said it, he said, I will not be mandating it. If you want to be vaccinated, you can be vaccinated. If you don't have to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so look.
So there's a couple of things going on in this whole situation. One is, what should the government do about it? How much power should they have? Right? And so we'll cover that in a little bit. One is the whole thing, what should be done about what is the actual COVID sickness, whatever, disease, what is it? And then there's the whole thing about the vaccine, and so is that the whole thing? So a little bit on the actual pandemic itself. You'll notice there are still people who are saying there is not a pandemic. It's all made up, right? Who've heard that? Yes?
But there is some things.
Okay, so let's understand the people and what they're saying. What are they saying?
Well, if you look at this.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Ben's going first. Yeah.
In particular, like just in Australia,
Yeah.
like if you look at the statistics, like we had so much worse and we weren't like having a vaccine or anything like that. But you know, even without a vaccine, we were actually seeing improvement in numbers.
So okay. So is there a pandemic? Australia, very low.
Like there's no doubt, you know, low socioeconomic stuff. Like countries and that, there's probably some real effect of COVID, and I'm not like disregarding that completely, but I'm just saying, particularly for Australia, that the massive push of the lockdowns are just insane almost.
Okay.
And all that kind of stuff.
You know, this is the very interesting bit, right?
Yeah, Kumar.
I'll bring a different perspective to this. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a car ad about how many people okay to be dying in the car accident, and then the guy goes, maybe 20.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, cool. There you go. 20 of your family. Is this okay?
Yeah. How many people are okay?
And instantly your tune changes.
Yes.
Once it hits you close to your home. And again, same thing. People I'm dealing with, I'm barraged with this on a daily basis. They call it a flu. They call it a hoax. They call it names like it's a government's plan to control you.
Yes. So yes, okay. So, and on the one hand, it's the government's plan to depopulate the world, or it could be a Chinese conspiracy to overthrow America, okay? Or it could be or it's actually a disease. So what are some stats? I've got some stats on. These are fresh out from a newspaper yesterday or the day before. So I was looking for some stats, specifically comparing it with the flu, and stuff like that. So the stats I've got, you've already got this. You haven't got this for you, Kumar. I should put it online.
Yep.
But I'll briefly run through what the stats are. The case fatality rate is a thing where how many people have died after being recognised as having COVID. In Australia, it's currently running at an overall 1%. So 1% of the people who've got COVID have died of it in Australia. Our peak CFR, that's a term that I made up myself. Just from looking at, there's a graph and it goes like this of fatalities, right? And for every country, it goes like that, right? Okay, and there's a peak at the top and then there's an ongoing thing. And our ongoing thing is 1%. Our highest peak is 2%. 2% of the cases about 6 months ago or 9 months ago were people were dying of it, okay? And then it flattens out and you end up 1% is our overall case, okay? In Italy, 3% is their current average. And their peak was 14%. Who remembers Italy? What was happening in Italy? They didn't have enough medical stuff, so they had hospital, what they call hospital overrun, where they had thousands of people going to hospitals, right? Blah, blah, blah. And so they were completely overloaded and people were dying of all sorts of things because there was no medical treatment, right? Okay. And so that's, how did they bring their rate back down to 3%? That's the question. We want to know the answer to that question, right? Does anyone know? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Nope, I'm not going to say it.
You're not going to say? Okay, what are my other stats? Okay, another important statistic that this page made a big deal of, okay, the age, how old you are is a big indicator of how your likelihood of dying. If you're under 60 years old, this number is 0.1%, right? So if you're under 60 years old, 0.1% of the people that get COVID die. Okay, whereas 1% overall, and what that means is there's a great higher percentage when you're over 60, over 70, as your age goes up 60, 70, 80, the chances of dying from COVID dramatically increase. So when you're over 80, it's like 50% chance of you going to die. I'm making that number up. But compared to the rest of the population, where it's 0.1%, and the very elderly who have all sorts of other medical conditions, it's pretty close to a very high percentage. So that's an interesting number to think about. Okay, how many people end up in hospital who got COVID? It's about, in Australia, currently right now, it's 4.6% of the current cases are in hospital.
How many cases are there?
There's about 25,000, something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Something like that. And so that's off my top of my head, it's 20,000 something. So about 4.5% of those people end up in hospital. Okay. Now I've got for you now the flu stats for 2019. That was the last year that we had flu.
According to the, sorry, just the
Yeah.
cases, new cases.
Not new cases, total cases.
Total cases, 130.
Australia. That's total cases ever, probably. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So people compare COVID to the flu, right? And they say it's just like influenza. Influenza kills people as well.
18,000.
18,000 now.
Estimated active cases.
Active cases in Australia. Okay, 18,000. That's close to 20,000, right? Yeah. Influenza, which is like serious flu, about 0.3% die. Okay. So that's about a quarter or a third of this. Okay, and it's again highly most representative of elderly people. Again, okay, so about 0.3%. How many end up in hospital? About 1%, or 1.3% end up in hospital for normal flu. 1.3%. We didn't have anyone really get the flu in 2020. Why was that? Everyone was locked down, right? Okay.
They got rolled into everything into COVID.
What's that?
All the stats got rolled into COVID.
All the stats got rolled into COVID? I don't think so. I think everyone was locked down and so it couldn't spread.
But also,
I think that was common perception. I think that was the common perception, but there is still stats out there about flu as well, while we're having a middle of pandemic.
Okay.
yeah,
So
it
you're
works
saying
out in terms of
recording. So if you've got both, then they'll label it as COVID. Is that what you're saying?
well, like sometimes it got labeled as COVID-19 in some severe cases.
When it wasn't?
Wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes and vice versa, like false negatives, false positives.
False negative, yes, yes.
Yeah,
That's
That's,
it.
all-
that's a PCR test, but that's a known fact, and even Fauci says that anything over a certain, past the million, and
Yep.
40 past the
Yep.
million can give you a positive, negative, positive
Yep.
case, and that's a fact. That's an actual fact, it's a written fact. So you could have COVID cases that really aren't COVID, or they are stated that they're COVID, but they're not, or they are negative, but they are positive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
and that's why we even have this confusion in Australia, that people are, oh, they've come back as positive, but now they're negative.
Yes,
You know what I
that's
mean?
right, yes.
So, and that's happened within WA, and more, you know, we've had lockdowns because of.
Someone's got COVID, but have they really got COVID? Yes, yeah, okay,
So, yeah, so-
okay.
So that's, so when you're talking about when people start looking into it further, is because things like that happen. And so there's doubt, causing doubt to come into people's minds.
Yep.
And,
Yes.
and so which creates untruths. And
Yes,
so people are searching for the truth.
I'm gonna write this one here. We've got to come back to this one later because this is fundamental. Okay, so my understanding is that we don't have significant influenza stats from 2020 and 2021 because some of it may be merged into COVID, but generally speaking, people were locked down so much that it had no opportunity to spread. And so really we didn't have a flu season. That seems to be a worldwide phenomenon. We haven't had a flu season, unlikely to get much this year as well. But then again, and theoretically, once lockdowns end, they're predicting the next year there'll be a large flu hit because people's immunities will be lower because they've been isolated so often and they haven't got small cases of flu. Okay, the statistics argue, based on these statistics, the person writing this thing is arguing that lockdowns are unnecessary. Only 0.1% of the healthy population are going to die from COVID, right? Okay, and very 5% are going to end up in hospital. Okay, Australian statistics. I think that they're misrepresenting the data. This is my personal opinion because, and is there an epidemic or not? Like, are people, the test numbers? I agree. You don't really know. Like, were there 20,000 tests with 5,000 false readings, whatever? I don't think that really matters. The fact that there was thoughts, we all know what was happening in India and in Italy. Italy was the worst case scenario. That was happening because COVID was running through without anything to stop it. And as soon as, and this has been Mark McGowan's thing the whole time. Once COVID gets out of control, you can't stop it, it's all over. And so as soon as you get, we've got a population in Australia of 25 million roughly, right? You want 5% of 25 million in hospital at the same time, okay, because of they've all got things, you're going to have ridiculously overrun hospitals, then you'll get the high 40% death rate that we had in Italy. Because the only way they stopped this and got it down was by going into lockdowns and exercise all of the other things that every other country had to do to bring the rate down. I don't think, how much lockdown you do and all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
is debatable and everything that, but without a lockdown, you get ridiculous hospital admissions. What we know from COVID is there's 25,000 people right now, however, we've got 20,000 people with COVID now during the lockdown. Okay, we've got influenza kills about a third of the people, but when there's lockdown, it gets nobody, pretty much, relatively speaking, because the contagious nature of COVID is so much higher than the contagious nature of other things that even a lockdown, it's going through and get high numbers of people. And the difference between, so to say, look at these Australian stats and say, well, you only lose 1% of, you only get a few people in hospital, only 1% of the population is going to die from it. That's 1% of the population in a lockdown mode. Okay, when you're not in a lockdown mode, you're gonna go from here on your graph to here, right? And so we have to realise, and this is what Mark McGowan is really worried about, right? He knows that as soon as he opens his borders, our really low, everything's happy in WA is going to be completely blown out of the water. What do we know about the vaccine? What does it do and what doesn't it do? What, from statistics so far?
Just go back to that graph.
Yeah.
Whereas I agree completely with what you're saying about the graph.
Yeah,
But you brought up India.
yeah,
Now, where is India now? Let's talk about India, because India's come out of COVID, but they are not used to that. It's only 14% of India that is vaccinated.
yeah,
Right, and they have distributed packages throughout India that's working, and it's packages that's even recognised by WHO.
Yeah.
Right, you can Google it all
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
I don't care what you do with it, but when you read the facts, you see that you're talking about a population of 1.3 billion people,
Yeah.
and we all know where India was.
yes.
Mate, they were the most scariest in the world when it came to that whole what you're
So
talking about now.
India weren't at 14%, they were on about 19%.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct, but they
They're
have
coming.
come out of that, and they're not
They're down to
against
about,
vaccination. right?
about 5, I think now.
Yeah.
They're about
They're-
5% now.
Yeah, they're not against vaccination, but they know how to control it.
Yeah.
And it's something that's has been ridiculed and laughed about in Australia and thrown off onto
Yeah.
the side. And we all know that it's won a Nobel Prize in 2015. And so why aren't we addressing these issues so we don't have our hospitals full?
Yes.
So this is all about hospitals being full.
That's
So
the,
let's address it and let's bring out the truth.
Yeah.
And so there is something that we can treat people with that's safe, that is safe.
Yeah.
And let's put that. Nothing wrong with having a vaccination.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. There's nothing wrong with having a vaccination, but let it go through its trials and testing to make sure it's safe.
Yeah.
So in regards to that, that's how I said it, because when you look at the model of India and where they were and where they are now, like you see two distinct differences.
so the distinct differences, I didn't use a vaccine, and what else?
No, it was from the ivermectin packages.
Yeah.
And it's not just ivermectin, there's vitamin D, vitamin B. There's a package with about 6 or 7 things, and also have an oximeter. So it measures their oxygen in the blood.
Yeah.
And they are regularly, they're at home, they're given those packages.
Yeah.
And they're regularly monitored from that.
Yeah.
And they're recovering within, getting shown symptoms of going within 18 hours, recovering from 18 hours.
Yep.
So there is something that's there in place.
Yep.
You can find that's easy to find.
So, and the point of what Paul is saying is, rather than rushing onto a mandatory vaccine, we should be trying other things. That's your point,
yeah,
right?
I don't have a problem with having a vaccine.
But you don't, but mandatory vaccine.
Let's make sure it's tested, tried, and proven to be safe for all people instead of just becoming the human trial.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Implement these things in between and say, yes, we've got to do a vaccine for this, like we have all in the past.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's good because we know they're proven and there's methods being put in place
Yeah.
by governments and government authorities in regards to these kind of things. So why step away from something that's safe and proven to something that we're just going to throw up in the air when we know something that's going to work as it was happening in India?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not saying I don't agree with you. How did they test what they're using in India?
Sorry,
How did they test what they're using in India?
how do they test what they're using in India?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Has it been tested more than the vaccine?
Has it been-
Well,
Yeah, I
first
mean,
they have gone through the CDC.
COVID's only been around for 2
Yeah,
years.
but ivermectin's been.
So how can you test it for more than 2
is
years?
a
Yeah.
standard across the world.
As a
in terms of
standard
medication.
medication for something else, yeah.
And there's been,
I suppose, Derek, coming from safety background, I think they would have a baseline of what efficiency and all the specs and whatever this vaccine's supposed to do. So they probably would have given this to the FDA and CDC and all that sort of people, or CSIRO, and to help people and trying to get through those data and see whether this thing is actually, because the baseline for them at the moment, the government's Pfizer, right, or whatever it is they call, and then it compare against that. I think that it's all comparison against baseline.
So what are you saying?
So what I'm saying is how they could have the question you were asking was how they could have tested it, and that was the baseline test.
And Ben was saying it's been around for a long time, so it's been tested in other situations, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
And there's actually been researchers and doctors have actually come up with evidence saying ivermectin works for COVID, but like Paul was
Yeah.
saying, don't just brush it to the side. And there's
Yeah.
been whistleblowers and stuff. And
Yeah.
people have been like gagged. because of
Yep.
it. And they've actually made it illegal for doctors to administer ivermectin in terms of COVID cases.
Yes. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on which adds to the conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you see something like that happening, that fuels the conspiracy theory thing. So the alternatives being brushed aside can really add to the conspiracy theory. So that we don't have any way of knowing which is more effective, a vaccine or ivermectin against COVID, until we've tried both for 5 years, right? We can't really be sure, but that it looks like it's working in India. Okay, but because COVID's only been around for 2 years, nothing has been tested against COVID for very long. So both of those are experiments, but they're different types of experiments, right? So the one's using something completely new, one's using something that's been around for a while. Yes.
Yes, I agree with you, but one is a proven experiment.
Yeah, that's right. It was proven against and another
The
for
vaccine
another.
is not a proven
Yeah.
experiment because we are.
Yeah. So one's been
So, yeah,
proven
that's very distinct.
for something, been proven for something else, but it hasn't been.
No, you're right, but it's been used for multiple, it was created for one thing
Yeah.
first, but then it's been used for multiple
Yes.
things throughout the world
Yes.
since then.
Yes,
since it's been
yes.
created, yeah.
So side effects are well known, long-term health effects are well known, but nothing from
no
it. Yes.
side effects for the ivermectin.
Yeah. Okay.
You know.
Okay. So everything has side effects, but okay. Okay. So this is vaccine or not, mandatory or not. Is there a thing we were talking about whether we will get? What will happen when we open our borders? What does the vaccine do and what doesn't it do? Does it stop you getting COVID?
Yeah, the purpose of vaccine.
No, it doesn't stop you from getting.
Okay.
No, it doesn't stop you from getting COVID, correct.
Okay. On the premise of vaccines in general, it should stop you from getting COVID. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm actually, what's
No,
it actually?
no.
Oh, it's actually, then it doesn't. No,
So, what does it do?
nothing.
It's-
Cause you get a blood clots and heart attacks.
Okay. So officially, based on what research is available, and it's not a huge amount with numbers, but it's supposed to at least halve the chance of you going to hospital
Yeah, right.
and halve the chance of you dying, right? So theoretically, it would change the 1% to a 0.5%, and it would change the 0.1% to 0.05, right? So that's the theory. It would keep you it would keep you alive. Even if you got sick, you get better. And it would lower the amount of people that go to hospital. So instead of 5% of your population going to hospital, 2% of the population are going to go to hospital. And so that
There's a knock-on effect on everything else around it. I think that's the problem, right?
what's
I
that?
think the knock-on effect on the economy, the hospital, the people.
Yes.
It's it's called the domino effect.
Yes. So yes. We'll look at that in a minute because we want to look at why is the government's motivation, right? We need to understand where they're coming from. Okay, so we know the vaccine will hopefully keep some people out of hospital. Well, that's the theory. That's why we want it. It doesn't stop transmission, right? And Mark McGowan knows this. So getting vaccinated doesn't protect your grandma from getting COVID, right? Because you can still carry it. So, and he got in trouble for that, got told off by federal government for mentioning the fact that he'll close his borders and do lockdowns because COVID will still spread through the country because and you can still spread COVID even when you've got the vaccine. So we understand what vaccine does and doesn't do. And again, this whole argument of whether it should be mandated or not is a part of that whole thing. Now, what I think that the hospital overrun scenario that we've seen in Italy and other countries indicates that there is a pandemic, regardless of the exact numbers. It indicates there is a serious problem. And without the lockdowns and things that we have done, we would have had the same result as other countries have had. And generally, so whether we like lockdowns or not, they are the things that have kept most of Australia relatively COVID-free. So our case numbers of although and we have the rough same percentage, like 1% of people who get it end up dying from it, and 5% go to hospital. That 5% is a very small 5%, right? So rather than having 10 million out of our 20 million people getting it, we've only had 100,000 out of the whole country, right? So this is, and that's 100% is because of our lockdowns and our hygiene and da. So although we don't like them, guarantee if we didn't have them, we would have been up on there. as well.
True, I agree, but
Yeah.
to the extent of which they have done,
Yes.
I don't think there's probably more negative effects. in
So
terms
that's
of-
the other side, as the negative effects
Yeah.
worse. That depends if you're an elderly person or not. Let's talk for a little bit about what is the government on about? What is Mr. Gowan? What is his goals? What is he trying to achieve?
He's an idiot.
Why? So why did he do a lockdown? So why was he the strictest, hardest lockdown pusher in the country?
Well, I guess he saw what happened in Italy, and there was actually no prevention, like you're saying.
Yeah.
The key to containing COVID is actually early prevention.
Early prevention. He said it over and over again. If it gets away from you, you never come back, right? And you'll point to yourself, others, see, I told you so, right? So 100%. Now, why didn't he want COVID in WA?
That's because that was his strategy, because his strategy was to eliminate. So that was the strategy he followed.
Why did he want to eliminate COVID in WA?
Well,
Like,
the
as to-
why was, well, I think he said it in one of those, he cannot stand by and watch people die.
Okay, that's a very noble answer. Any other suggestions?
So we can actually control them.
To win an election, mate. Okay, he's a government person.
Oh, politics.
Primary goal is to win an election, right? Okay, and did it work? Was that Kumar Zaya? So did
Come back.
he win an election? Answer is the most powerful election win ever in WA, right? Because everyone was so appreciative that they could still go to the beach and go to church and do whatever they like when the rest of the country are wearing masks and WA is partying in the sun, right? Of course, we're going to vote for the government back because
Change that now.
and basically the border was the thing that did that, right? The other reason, of course, is that all of Australia runs on WA's mining and resource sector, right? We all know that. Okay, if that stops, everyone's in trouble, right? Okay, so regardless of what everyone's saying, we have to keep the mines running. Is that right, Kumar?
Absolutely.
That's right. So the main reason we have to, I'm talking as Prime Minister of WA, the main reason everyone must be vaccinated and we will still have lockdowns, right, is we are going to keep our mines running. And if everyone's vaccinated, even if they get COVID, they still go to work, right? Because they're not going to get that sick. We won't even know. Okay, and then we won't have, sub-point, WA hospital system's really underfunded, understaffed. If we had 5% of our population knocking on the door wanting treatment, right, it would be this, that's an election loser for every premier, right? So there's no way he's going to have a hospital overrun while he's premier. Yes, Kumar?
It's already happening right now with I think two days ago, they had a record number of ambulance ramping throughout WA.
And we don't even have COVID, right?
That's right,
That's
no
the whole
COVID.
point.
But that comes back to, this is the vaccine.
This is what the vaccine, it's a vaccine making people
We've actually
sick.
seen a skyrocket in terms of heart attacks, blood clots and strokes.
Myocarditis.
Myocarditis, blah, blah, blah.
Myocarditis.
Myocarditis, yeah.
It's out of control, mate.
So what are the numbers? What are the
I
numbers?
don't know the numbers. but I know
Nobody will
30%.
give you the real numbers.
No one will give you the real numbers.
So, and I can tell
What
you.
numbers?
for
What numbers we're talking here?
How people getting hospital
Okay,
admissions
okay.
for vaccine side effects.
Look, I can say, right, this is a true story. I walked in a week ago.
Yeah.
Into Reece, my supplier.
Yeah.
As a plumbing supplier, and I went into the manager's office, and I was like, just thinking about how Daniel Andrews has just passed that new law.
Yeah.
Where he is subject to nobody, right?
Oh, okay.
So you talk about draconian law.
Yes,
So
yes,
this,
yes.
This is on my mind, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm going, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Right? And so now, and of all things, I just hit the manager's door, I shut it, and I sit down, and as I'm thinking, And I said to him, what's the world coming through? And as I said that to him, I looked at him and he had a face of despair and of no hope.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I said, Kieran, sorry, mate. Like, is something wrong? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And he goes, no, I'm not okay. I said, oh, why? And he goes, on Sunday, he goes, I went with my wife, it's all mandated the vaccination. So when my wife was fine, she got shot, I got the shot. He goes, within 5 minutes, I was having epileptic fits on the ground.
Yep.
He goes, shaking and convulsing, and he goes, uncontrollably. And he goes, this went on for about 15 minutes. And he goes, and then they held me there for an hour. And then he goes, from there, he goes, they said, oh, look, you'll be right, just book in for the next vaccine shot.
No way, right?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
this is true. But
Yeah.
this is not an uncommon story,
Yeah.
right? And this is where you talk about adverse effects, right?
Yeah.
So but then, and then I said, well, how are you feeling now? And he goes, not good. He goes, I've had blackouts, foggy brain. He goes, well, I'm at work and I don't even. He goes, I'm not even doing things well I normally am doing. And he's a good manager.
Yeah.
Right? He's a really good manager. Right. And do you know what I said? I was like, then and there, I felt like Peter, when the man was sitting there on the ground and being lame from birth.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it was like, just that just came over me and I said, you know, Kieran, I don't understand what's going on around the world at the moment either. I said, I don't understand the whole mandate of vaccination. But I said, but what I can do for you, I said, I can pray for you for the washing of the blood of Jesus over what the vaccine is going to. And I said, are you happy for me to pray for you? And he goes, yeah, that'd be good. Well, can you do that?
That's right.
And so we prayed that man, and I prayed for him and just put hope into a situation with no hope. You know, so when you talk about adversity, that's not the first one. I've seen her multiples and multiples within our society, within WA.
Yes. So there's a problem with the vaccine. We get that. And what you did, shortcut to the end of the session, that's is exactly what the main thing that we should be doing, right? Exactly. We've got, there's a whole lot of things we can do, but the main thing that we should be doing is bringing hope, right? And ministering God to people in the middle of a crisis. If it's not COVID crisis, it's going to be some other crisis, right? Yeah. But our main thing, we've got to keep our focus on our main thing. And our main thing is bringing hope, bringing the gospel, ministering miracles to people. That's way more useful because at the end of the day, when it comes to what's the right treatment, we're all pretty much guessing, right? None of us really have that much clue, but we do know what we have got. What we have got is Jesus, and that's the main thing we want to minister. So that's very important. Now, I was just going to look, we were talking about the government's motivation. Their motivation is to keep the economy running. Their motivation is to win elections. And maybe there's a motivation to not let people know how badly underfunded our hospital system is. Okay, these are probably some of the things that are driving or maybe keeping people alive might be on the list as well, right? But we understand that it makes sense to me that if a vaccine keeps people on the job, that's why we're going to push it, right? But yeah, that makes sense to me because it doesn't make sense, not because it's not going to stop the spread or anything like that. It's not going to keep anyone alive. It's going to keep some people alive, but the elderly are still going to be in trouble. Okay. What is the government doing? They want to win elections. Okay. What else I want to know? How much power should the government have? This is the big question that everyone's talking about. Okay. How much power should the government have? What do we, briefly, most people are saying, right? Government's pushing too hard, doing too hard. Okay. If the lockdown was optional and if mask wearing was optional, when we were going up the curve, what would have happened? Who's going to go into lockdown by choice? No. Who's going to wear a mask by choice? Kumar says yes, he understands. And on the mine side, Kumar, if the government haven't mandated mask wearing, would you guys still do it?
People are already doing it.
Yeah, you do it anyway, right?
Because like you go through the airport, you're on the flights, like coming up here, all the flights to any mine site, you must wear a mask.
Yep.
You must go through a
depending on which organisation you're part of, you need to get your temperature taken.
Yep.
And some sort of scanning needs to happen, tracking who's on the flight.
Yeah, and you're doing that because you want to keep yourself running regardless of what goes on, right?
That's right, and of course the interest of greater good.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yes, the country needs you, and so yeah, so we can see that apart from people that have a lot of risk, your average Australian is not going to do a lockdown or wear a mask unless someone makes them. Okay, we unfortunate if the Premier could get on and say there's a COVID thing coming, I want you please to wear a mask, I recommend it because it'll help our state. And if people actually said yes and cooperated, and then but it wasn't required, then occasionally you might be able to pull off, like there'll be some flexibility in it, but because people aren't going to do it unless you make them, this is the reason why the government has gone to mandatory anything. Okay, so now what's the official, because we're a democracy and the government isn't allowed to do this, what's the official mechanism that enables them to do lockdowns and
Emergency power.
what's that?
Isn't it emergency power?
Emergency, they declare a state of emergency, and then when there's a state of emergency, you can do all sorts of things you can't do normally.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right. And they make sure it's every 3 months too.
That's right. So has anyone said yet when the state of emergency will end? That would be nice, wouldn't it? If the government had said this is the pathway, blah, blah, state of emergency ending, then people might think, oh, okay, there might be a bit more buy-in.
Instead of passing it
But,
Again, can I paint a different picture? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yep.
I think there's other countries out there who've been there, who've done that very early on. In fact, there's one who done one 6 months ago within our very region.
Yep.
Then they opened up and did, no, we're not doing this anymore. The cases skyrocketed from 0 to 3,000 and
Yep.
went up. In fact, today it's sitting at $6,500 cases.
Yep.
That's Singapore.
Small country, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Any idea on how many hospitalizations and stuff?
I don't know, but I think the death toll is increasing.
There's going to rise in Singapore. They're actually not even treating it as a COVID. They're treating it like a flu. So
Now, again, they have world-class health system as well.
Right.
Yeah, but isn't Singapore,
They're already going to
predominantly, they're pretty much vaccinated.
I don't think they
Yeah,
are.
they're going through it, yeah. Because there's obviously in the middle of all this, again, I'm not debating.
Yeah.
There's other so-called variants lifting its head as well, like cobras.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is causing a bit of a havoc because again, there's limited amount of data available for the government to work with. So hence they go like any good leaders, they go, okay, it's easier to keep it under control this way than.
Yes. No, I understand. I understand that it's easy for me to say, let's have a roadmap out of the state of emergency, but you can't predict what's going to happen next. You got no idea, except you can be, as I think, he is very sure that as soon as he opens the borders, his popularity is going to go right down because cases are going to go up, hospitalization is going to go up. It's actually all going to be lose, lose, lose for him. Okay. What does the Bible say about all of this stuff that we've been talking about? What does the Bible say? We talk about our situation, understanding where we are. What does the Bible say about so far, apart from the fact that it's not the mark of the beast, because we understand Revelation now? What else does the Bible say about this whole situation? What does the Bible say about how much power the government should have? Kumar went like this. What does that mean?
Well, the Bible says, what Bible says very simple, it say obey authority, God's place over your.
Yeah, but it also says it also talks about when it starts coming against what you believe and what the actual Bible starts coming.
Agree.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what shouldn't listen.
So obey the government, and what are the situations in the Bible where people haven't obeyed the government?
Well,
And
you want to go back to
Lawful.
beginning?
Yeah, go anywhere in the Bible.
No, we've already talked about this in class. But we
Yeah.
talked about the midwives of Pharaoh.
We've got
So,
midwives.
yeah, so when, protecting life,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Who else we got? We've got Paul the Apostle and Peter the Apostle preaching the gospel when they're told not to.
Yeah,
What else? People that have just have gone against government. Pete Daniel, when he wouldn't bow down and worship.
yeah.
This Daniel is Moses.
Moses.
Yep.
Oh, Moses opposing Pharaoh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's correct.
Absolutely.
Was he breaking the laws?
Well, he did because at that time, with the Pharaoh seen as the ultimate God king.
He was a bit obnoxious. I
Yeah.
don't know if he broke any laws though. I don't know if he did or not. I don't know. It doesn't really say. He just went to Pharaoh and talked to Pharaoh and told him, yeah.
Well, he's the king, well, he's the king of Egypt, realistically.
Pharaoh was, yeah.
And basically they're, even though they're God's people, but they became
Egypt, yes, yes.
his slave, so yeah.
He remember they asked for permission to leave the country and they didn't leave until they had permission.
Yeah.
Okay, but his arm was twisted, but yes. Okay, so we will not kill people, even if you tell me to.
Yep.
I will not worship idols, even if you tell me to. I will preach the gospel, even if you tell me not to.
Yes.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Have I missed anything important? Dun, 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 dun. No, not really.
What about, when you had Esther and Mordecai, is it, Esther and,
Esther didn't break any laws.
no, she didn't.
She used diplomacy and skillful negotiation.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
Was it Mordecai, was it?
Mordecai, yes.
Yeah, so Mordecai, because they were under persecution, he went to her and said, look, let's presented it.
Yes,
Look,
yes.
please, can you?
Yes, and so she presented an appeal to the authority,
Yeah.
but she didn't break any laws.
No,
She just
didn't.
asked for the laws to
She
change.
didn't break
Yeah.
any laws,
yeah.
no.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, who was the government then?
He didn't know.
Second to the government.
Yeah, but I mean,
So we're
Yeah.
talking about when in the Bible have people not obeyed the government? Okay, we're talking about do we obey the government, yes or no?
yeah.
The situations in scripture where people have not obeyed the government.
I know, I was just thinking, I was like, I'm not
All
gonna
good.
do that, so-
It's all good. Okay,
Yeah, right.
so these are the sorts of things. Nothing in that list speaks to me about our current situation. Not really.
Very helpful, isn't it?
Okay, now does this mean if the government says lockdown, you can't go to church, we disobey?
Yes. Mr. Edward preached. Mr.
What about if they say you go to church but you can't sing?
Pretty sure there's-
Yeah, they say, okay, you can go to
They did
church
that- They did that in.
in Sydney for a long time, right? New South Wales. No singing in church, right? Okay, what are our options as Christians when the government says you can't sing in church? What are our options?
Worshiping your heart.
Worship in your heart.
They're telling you not to worship.
Why are they saying this in theory? Are they persecuting the church?
No, not
I
really.
don't think so. I think they're just applying a blanket rule.
It's like a blanket royal health order, right? You can't sing at the nightclub either, right? Okay, you can't. They don't really want people gathering at all, but if you're going to gather, you're going to keep your mouth shut, so you're not spitting on the congregation. So, how could we have worship without people singing in church? This is not hard.
What, can I relate that back to, and tell me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
say so.
Yeah.
But what about when Daniel would go back?
In his room and pray,
Yes. would go
and he was
back
told
and
not to
pray.
pray. Yes,
Yeah, you know what I mean?
yes, sort of.
It was very similar.
So it's
You know,
close,
He was
right?
told not to do that, but he went and did that.
Yes, he was
And-
told to pray to someone else. He was told the only person who prayed was me. Right? He said, I'm going to pray to Jerusalem, I'm going to pray to the God of heaven, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it's close because the government is not saying you can't pray to God, not saying you can't worship Jesus. All he's saying is you can't do this in a group of whole people together singing. But he's not saying you can't play a worship video and sing in your hearts, right? Or sing when you're behind your mask. You can still do that, right? You can still have all the sound. You have better music than you had before because you can have Hillsong in your church every Sunday, right? Okay, so there's options. Before we get carried away, there are
Yeah,
options,
yeah.
right? Okay, because they're not banning worship.
Then,
As such.
it's the same deal with, like I said, like Peter and Paul, they're told not to talk and spread the gospel,
Yes,
right? and this is what we can't.
So if they said,
How
if
is
they
it
said you
different?
can't gather on Sunday to preach and you can't live stream your service either because they're banning the gospel, that's a completely different story
Yeah.
to a logistical change in the, and actually good for us to get shoved. Theoretically, the church should have been smart enough to respond to this so cleverly that church is better post-COVID than before COVID, if we're smart.
Yeah.
Church should be better post-COVID.
I understand what you're saying, but then, with that whole thing, how does that differ? Because people can come in and it's worship that actually draws them to the gospel of Christ. Do you know what I mean? Some people come into church
Yes,
and there's nothing that like, but that like the fact of the presence of God
yes,
in through worship
Yes.
of people all singing together. You
yes.
know,
So people can't sing out loud, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And that's a problem?
Yeah.
Okay,
People
but
are stating they've got worship, that, or, you know, we can eliminate that off and say that, you know, the government says don't worship, so you don't worship.
But we can play worship music and worship in our hearts behind our masks, right? As we're
Yeah.
not, and we can still lift our hands, we can still clap, we can still bow, we can still do everything except open our mouths with the mask off. Right? Okay, so we can get around it, and we can not be dependent on one thing to lead people to Christ, because it's worship that brings people to Jesus, and that's Holy Spirit. We've got to be smarter, right? And we should be, and it should be theoretically, we should be innovating better in 21st century, post-COVID, and this was our chance to innovate and actually do something that can't be stopped by.
If we don't praise him, then the
Rocks will praise him, yes. And so we're still going to praise him, okay? And we can, like, spread people out, and we theoretically, if there's a limit on 30 people in your church, well, there's nothing stopping you having 30 rostering 30 people at a time throughout the day, right? And throughout the week. And then you could have 24/7
Oh,
worship.
yeah, definitely.
There's nothing stopping you doing that if you're creative and innovative, right? Okay, so there's all sorts of things. But I don't think we're at a stage where the ACC churches or most churches think there's any value in disobeying the government on this. But we are lobbying the government and saying, hey, let's make sure we don't extend this unnecessarily
We're not
long.
willing to die on this hill, basically.
It's not really, I don't think it's that anti-God persecutionally enough to say we're gonna, okay? And now that's different to, right? Some of those other laws in Melbourne, right? Where he's saying you can't talk about this anymore, you can't, these Bible verses are now officially against the government, right? If you talk about gender and things like that, that's a totally different ballgame, because now you're saying, I can't pray for you for deliverance, right? From a homosexual spirit. Because now I'll get arrested for doing that, even if you ask me to. Now that is a completely different story. Because now you're saying the gospel, I'm not allowed to preach it, I'm not allowed to say it, regardless of whether it's the medium online or whatever. Now you're saying don't promise deliverance and hope. That's a completely different story. Yes, Paul.
Yeah, so when you mentioned about, like, you know, the transgender law,
Yeah.
the gay law, and everything like that. So did the church come up too late in regards to responding to that? Just like worship, so shut the church down and worship, you make it today.
Yeah, I guess
Compromise
slide.
today
Yes,
is
yes.
tomorrow's stand, and before you know it, it becomes something of where you've adjusted it and then you're fighting for it at the last moment.
Well, it's possible. It's possible. The gender thing's been going on for a long time,
Yeah.
right? And the churches, we cover this in ethics. The biggest problem is the church is completely divided and not united on it. So because the church is not united on it, half the Christian population, regardless of your denomination, actually don't believe what the Bible says about gender, right? And so therefore the Christian church is not united, so they've got very little say. Yeah.
And is that because it wasn't talked about for so long?
Yes, that's
Do you know
because,
what I mean? And
yeah.
then it became by the wayside, and then we allowed for the world to infiltrate the church, and to the church infiltrating.
The world's completely infiltrated, and it
Yeah.
hasn't been spoken about enough in a compassionate, kind, loving, caring, gospel winning way. The only, like, the predominant presentation is being harsh, anti-violent, you know, mean, nasty, hate, and there hasn't been a real parallel against that. So there's multiple factors. Yeah.
I think this is where the whole denomination comes to its head and causes a lot of problem, because each of this denomination, I'm not naming names, would have their own agenda and what they feel important. So they can't really come down and agree to one united agenda, and they can't really present a united front.
You mean different Christian denominations have disagree on things? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, no, there's a problem with that. So ACC will form ACC National, will be lobbying the government in a certain direction, right? And then other
Be careful what I say as well. To record.
denominations will be saying opposite when Pastor Joel goes and has his meeting with Mark McGowan and with all the church leaders and stuff. Like he speaks on one subject and others are like almost speaking against him at the same time, right? And they have very different priorities about what they want the government to do, and that's not helpful. A united front is much more helpful. But yes.
But are you talking about churches that are reading the same Bible?
Oh, totally, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, but remember, some denominations don't really prioritize scripture as much as maybe we do. Because there's a lot other, we are more enlightened, 21st century, even some Pentecostal churches for sure. Interviewing churches when there was the whole referendum thing a couple of years ago, complete opposite positions being proposed by churches of the same denomination, right? Pentecostal churches saying we should just support them and love them and keep them, and others saying it's a slippery slope, and the next thing you know, they'll be telling our kids they have to, all that sort of thing. Both sides, churches, same denomination, having differing point of views. So yeah. Okay, government, do we obey the government? What do we do? Now, we live in a democracy. The Bible does not understand democracy. We have to realize in the Bible there was never a democracy. So there's nothing in the Bible about democracy. This was all about harsh, self-centered, opinionated emperors doing their own thing and requiring you to worship me, right? And ruling by force and all that sort of thing. Nothing like democracy. So
In fact, when you go through the Bible throughout time, most of it wasn't democracy.
there never was. Never was a democracy. Democracy is a very new thing, right? So what we have in democracy that they didn't have is the right to protest, the right to appeal, the right to vote, all of those things the Bible has no concept of, okay, because it never existed, okay? So that's something that the Bible never really tells you how to vote or how to express your disagreement with the government, apart from general principles, because that was never an option. In apart from praying for the government, obviously, and serving and blessing and loving and all of those general principles. So praying for the government's got to be our first thing, right? Our first thing. And when it comes to government, we've got to pray for them, honour them. Those things are universal. And then whether we protest and complain about stuff, okay, we can do that in an honouring way and a servant way and all that sort of thing. Yes. Okay. What else does the government say? What does the government say about personal freedom when it comes to the government? Because a lot of it, my body, my choice, government can't tell me what to do. So I think this is a big part of the conversation. What does the Bible say about my personal freedom compared to what the government's telling me to do? How much can the government tell me?
What is it in Corinthians or is it in
What? I don't know what verse, right? No, unless you give me some words.
No.
Let me think. Ephesians.
We did this in ethics at one.
We might have talked about it before. What does the Bible tell me about how much, where's the borderline between government authority and personal freedom according to Scripture? Okay, that's helpful. I was wondering what Paul's got, because I'm really curious.
I think you are. I literally just finished Corinthians, so I think I'm going to.
First Corinthians.
1 Corinthians.
And then also, I think it's in Peter.
Yeah.
Scriptures in Peter, I can't remember.
I've got nothing to go on
Peter,
here.
hang on, I think they've got here.
They've got them here, yeah.
Peter 2, so First Corinthians, I think.
Honour the king, submit to the government, all that sort of thing. Yeah. Now this is interesting because you'll hear all sorts of preachers. I listened to a session, just part of my research, I listened to a session from a church in Perth where the guy was preaching about government overreach and government going too far. No, you're not going to ask. I'm not going to say. Not hard to Google, mate. Not hard to find. But I'm curious to see what scriptures we can come up with about the boundary between government's role, my personal freedom.
So do you want me to read?
Yeah, read it.
So 1 Corinthians 10:23
Yeah.
to 32.
Yeah.
All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify.
That's
No
right.
one seeks his own, but each one the other's well-being. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord and all his fullness. If any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner and you desire to go eat whatever is set before you, asking no question for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this is offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you,
Yes.
and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with things, why am I evil? Why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do to the glory of God. Give no offense either to the Jews or the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many that they may be saved. I don't think that's the scripture.
That's exactly the scripture.
Is it?
What's it got to do with governments and freedom? The answer is nothing at all. Okay. It's nothing at all. It's talking about freedom in Christ. I'm free, right? I'm not bound by legalistic blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
because I'm free now, right? I can drink alcohol or not drink alcohol. There's no legalistic rule that's binding me. So now I'm free to serve you and lay down my life for you and do you good. And I'm not held up. My selfishness is no longer going to bind me. I'm now free to love you and serve you. When we get free in Christ, we're free from the flesh, right? So now use your freedom to serve one another. Okay, that's the whole point. My freedom means I'm not going to cause anyone to stumble anymore because I'm not a slave to anything. Now, all things are beneficial for me. That's what it says. But not all things are good for me. So I'm smart now. All things are legal for me, right? All things are permissible. I'm not going to be enslaved by anything. And all things are beneficial, all things are legal for me, but not all things are beneficial for you. So I'm not going to do something with my freedom that hurts you, right? And now that has nothing to do with government freedom, different freedom, okay? So we people quote these scriptures, but really they're nothing to do with the question that I asked. Yes?
So then, when I read this,
Yeah.
So does that mean that we don't go and look to see what's in the vaccine and we just take it for the
Okay.
sake of taking it? Is that-
Possibly, you could interpret it that way, okay? But it's not really about medicine, it's about idol worship, okay? So what it means is when you go to the supermarket and buy your meat, you don't ask whether that was halal meat or not. Was it offered to Mecca? Was it sacrificed to Allah when they killed the cows? You don't care. Right, there was a big stink back in New Zealand when I was like 10 years ago, because they were setting apart an area of the abattoirs where they were killing the sheep and the cows, and they were doing halal certified Allah dedications over the meat so they could sell it to the Muslim community. And it was a huge, big thing, right? We're not going to do this, bring curses and demonic into our country. And it's true. You're opening up the country to the demonic, right? But as a Christian, I'm not going to go, I can't buy that. What if that's been offered to Allah? Then I'll get contaminated and I'll lose my salvation. Right? I'm not worshipping Allah or any other idol if the meat that I buy in the shop has been offered to a god. Okay, if I go to a Chinese restaurant and they've done something over the food or over the restaurant and they've blessed it and dedicated it to some other god or something, it's not going to affect me, right? Because I'm full of the power of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. God, great. Okay, I'm going to eat food. Food is food. God made food. We were created for us to be received with thanksgiving. But if my Hindu friend comes to me and says, oh, I don't go to that restaurant because I know those people, they're from that, I used to worship like they do, and I know they still do that over all the meals, so I don't eat there. I'll go, praise God, I'll go with you to McDonald's any day, mate, right? That's all good. I'm not going to take him and say, you should go there, trust Jesus. I'm going to say, I'm with you, let's go somewhere where the Christians are serving food. And we'll be together and do that. That's what that passage is actually about. Yes.
Yeah, and I understand it. So
Yeah.
then, so when we talk about vaccine,
Yeah. We
because
can,
we know that all the vaccines have HEK 293.
okay, I didn't know that, because I don't know what that is.
So
But yeah.
that's human embryo kidney 293.
Okay, there's another thing about human embryo kidney, yes. What is that? I do know about this after.
Yeah, it's actually quite,
What is it?
well, there's actually aborted fetuses.
What, okay, where does the aborted fetus come into the story of the vaccine?
Where does it come in? from?
Yeah, are they harvesting aborted fetuses to make the vaccine?
Well,
Yes or no?
When you do start reading into it, for them to, like, because you've got to have an integrity of the vaccine,
Yeah.
it's got to be tested.
Yeah.
Every so many batches has to be
Yeah.
tested. So they've got to use the HEK, and it's always, then with HEK, it's to be doing live. It's normally live.
Is that correct? Do you know that's
And
correct?
so that's pretty cool. So when we talk about abortion, right? and
Yes.
You're using this aborted fetus now, instead of keeping it alive, right? And to save the life,
Yes.
like we're now
So
using this in a
my understanding of the whole aborted fetus involvement in the vaccine is that in 1973 and in 1970 something, there were a couple of aborted fetuses that were used for scientific research. And from that, they developed some big thing. And the information and knowledge and stuff that they got out of that research resulted in many medical breakthroughs, including our current vaccines. Okay, so the current vaccines wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this fetus that was aborted fetus that was used for medical experimentation about 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
I'm not aware of
it.
it harvesting right now to test or create. I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, because they say because you've got to understand with the HEK, it's to do with when it's dead, it's no good. You
Yes.
gotta have the live.
Yes,
So
my
when it's
understanding is
live,
the thing
yeah.
they got in 1973, they can keep alive and grow.
Yeah, there's.
They grow it because they can keep it alive. Yes, right?
So there's even, so I went to, in high school, I was doing genetics.
Yes.
And some of that, and we actually had cells that replicated themselves that was originally from this, cancer, patient. 100 or so, like, you know.
Yeah.
A few decades ago, you know, so it is, for I don't know in terms of stem cells, I don't know in terms of stem
Yes.
cells, but in terms of cancer cells, it is very possible, but I'm
Yeah.
not too sure.
Yeah,
about
my
that.
understanding from what I read was that back in the 70s, when they did this, they harvested a fetus and a stem
Yeah, I
cell
know-
and
I
stuff,
know that.
and they've kept growing it since from the original.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
But I have seen others, and you had worked in it.
Yeah.
And they said it's not possible, but they are still using HEK. So HEK is that's a human embryo kidney.
Yeah.
But then the numbers, that number,
Yeah.
can, you know,
Yeah.
there's so many tests to keep them going. You know what I mean? That's fetal number 293 or whatever it is. So you
Right.
know what I mean? So it's not, yeah, like I don't fully understand that they are saying yes, it's still in use, and it's definitely there's sides where they're saying no, it's not, and then there's sides saying yes, it's
Yes.
not. There's no way that they would not still be using it.
So that's interesting. So there was the Archbishops of Sydney, New South Wales, wrote to the Scott Morrison and said they're very concerned that the vaccines come from stem cells from aborted babies and stuff like this. And that caused a big controversy because then they were telling the expectation or the understanding was Christians are going to go, I'm participating in abortion if I take the vaccine, right? And I think what you're saying is correct. This passage sort of does apply in that context to that. If I didn't know and I just get the vaccine, because I've had all sorts of vaccines, I don't know how many of the vaccines I've had in my life have been coming from this,
Yeah.
right? I
There's
don't know
lots
any-
of them. They reckon
That's right.
countless. Yeah.
That's right. So on the one hand, and I haven't been sinning by doing that, and I haven't been participating in abortion by doing that. I read a few articles about this because I thought this was an interesting thing. And it depends a lot on how close it actually is. But for example, you could say that it was a sin there's a thing called the ethical distance from the crime to the benefit. Okay. For example, it was a sin for Joseph's brothers to sell him as a slave to Egypt, right? That was a sin. Definitely a sin, right? God turned that sin around and brought salvation for the whole nations around. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when I eat the food that Joseph provided for me, am I participating in the sin of his brothers and selling him into slavery? Because if they hadn't done it, I wouldn't have that food.
Yeah, but that's when we're just talking about this whole thing that is today.
I know, this is the thing, right?
You're talking about like, you know about Sonny.
So I know that Joseph was sold into slavery.
Yeah.
And I'm turning up and knocking on his door and buying food from him.
Yeah.
Right. And he would not be there if they hadn't sinned and sold him into slavery.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, am I guilty of the sin of the brothers who sold him into slavery because I'm benefiting from his trip to Egypt? What do you think that makes sense that I'm guilty of selling him into slavery if I'm participating in the benefit of his slavery?
Yes, you are.
I'm guilty. So every person,
And
person,
you
yeah.
willingly, like, you know, you now you're saying he's participating because he knows about it, and so he's taking it. So yeah.
So when I turn up and I buy food from Joseph, the provider of Egypt, it's a sin for me to do that.
No, hang on. So go back.
I'm buying food from Joseph,
Yeah.
right? Which he has provided because of he was sold as a slave to Egypt, right? There's a direct link between Joseph being sold as a slave.
Oh, no,
And food being provided.
No, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm not, right?
No,
Yeah. So there's a distance
no,
between.
I think that's unrelated because I see what you're saying, but I think that's unrelated because you're talking about God has taken Joseph.
Taken something that was bad and turned it for good.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. So God has taken something that was bad and turned it for good. It's possible that God has taken something bad and turned it for good, right? God can turn good out of every bad.
Yeah, I agree.
But that doesn't mean that we keep doing bad.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so if there's a way to benefit from without and still oppose, and we just got to work out how to communicate that clearly to people.
Yeah, so then can I ask you then, if HEK is still being activated on live aborted babies now?
Harvested from fresh aborted babies, yes.
Yeah. Is that a sin? Is that a sin? And for them using it and testing it and for the
If people are still harvesting, because that's illegal, you're not supposed to do that, right? So that's a crime to do that.
Oh, well, China does it.
China does it, yeah, okay. It's a crime in Western countries to do it.
Who's to say?
And who knows what's in it, okay.
As no one, but nobody can do nothing about it.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so if people who are making Australian vaccines are actively harvesting fresh, aborted human babies to do that, then I would say Christians should be completely against anyone producing that vaccine. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that it is.
Yes.
I'm just saying that that is one of the things that is actually thrown out as a true argument.
Yes. So and it depends on the distance, right? It depends on the distance. If they're harvesting fresh, aborted humans on a regular basis every time they create a batch of vaccine, right? That's completely different to benefiting from some scientific research 30 years ago that someone did on an aborted. That's completely different. Because then you're saying, immunize me, and therefore I'll turn my blind eye to the fact that you're going to go away and rely on a criminal act happening right now to do it. It's totally different.
Okay.
I think it's completely different.
Yeah.
So yes, so I would say the church would be rightly, completely against any vaccine that's relying on regular, I think that'd be a completely.
Yeah, no, I can't
Totally
argue that it's a fact, but like some say it's a fact.
Yes,
and,
this is half of the
and
problem.
others say that it's not,
Yep.
so that so it's.
And one of the biggest problems with this whole thing is there's so much half-truth guesswork. It's very hard to know what's actually true and what's actually not, because there's so.
Why I don't want to do the vaccine.
Oh yeah, totally. I know there's a lot of good reasons why people are slow and dragging the chain on getting the vaccine, because no one really knows. As they say, no one knows what's in it. Hey, no one knows what's in anything we buy and eat these days. That's the flip side. But that whole thing, and then making it mandatory when there might not, the whole thing one of the big things is, and that one of the big things that's going on, to wrapping up probably, is whether it all comes down to in the society, do you trust the government or not? If you trust the government, the vaccine's the answer, right? If you don't trust the vaccine, the government, the vaccine is a conspiracy.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much it. It's well, it's not a well, if there's alternatives that are equally as good in the government as hushing people up, it's conspiracy, right?
What's the definition of this conspiracy?
A deliberate plan to deceive and manipulate the country. Deliberate plan. It's like there's two alternatives.
yeah,
The government is sincere and doing their best for the country, or the government has another agenda and they're hiding it behind COVID. Those are the two choices, right?
Yes, but it doesn't mean it's a conspiracy. Just because the government thinks that that's the best plan, it doesn't mean it's the
Okay.
best plan.
So this,
You know what I mean?
so yes, so we've got the government, and we've either got conspiracy or we've got sincerity, right? And if we've got sincerity, we could have wise or foolish,
That's correct.
right? And now everyone places the government in one of these boxes, right? It's either a conspiracy, and if it's a conspiracy, everything the government does is a conspiracy. And those are the people where it's the mark of the beast, okay? It's a Marxist takeover. The Russians run the CIA, okay? Everything you read, like, everything is infiltrated by Marxists, leftists, every other word you can think of bad, okay? It's all run by Bill Gates, right? And okay, he's going to depopulate the world by 20% in 5 years. And you know, you've all heard of that stuff, right? Okay, conspiracy theory, like everything the government does is evil, right? Every leader is evil, blah, blah, blah. So or the government is actually trying to do its best, right? But they're not very clever, okay? They're just not very smart, okay? Or they are very smart, and everyone is, people land somewhere in here. Now, my opinion, my observation is that my generation sort of hover here and here. We've had too many Watergates, right? Too many scandals, too many government corruption things. We've had too many like failed medical initiatives. Like when we were kids, x-rays were recommended for babies until they found that all these babies were getting deformities, okay? And as you go through, all these things are recommended by governments. Turns out, oh, that's a mistake. That was actually harmful to people. That's a repeated cycle, right? And so my generation are cautious about new medical things, right? Because governments have a reputation, seem to fail as often as they get it right. And the failures are well publicised. We also understand, my generation, that even if you're sincere, big business is driving a huge amount of what's going on in government. There's so much money involved, right? That even sincere governments are manipulated by big businesses. That's our suspicion, my generation, okay? So we're very cautious, but it's not necessarily a deliberate conspiracy, but it's manipulated by big business and not necessarily getting the best advice, so it's a 50-50 chance. So when it comes to the current vaccine, there's a fair bit of money involved if you're going to vaccinate every person in the world, right? Okay, and is it, well, we all know it hasn't been tested, so we're pretty cautious. My opinion, and I'm going to ask Ben what he thinks, I think younger people are more trusting of the government than my generation. What do you reckon?
Yeah, those are that
There's generally
yes.
speaking, on average,
Generally speaking,
the
yeah.
government is pretty well trustworthy, reliable.
But I
Hey,
don't-
Derek, define younger.
What's that?
Define younger.
Younger?
25 and under.
25 and under? Yeah.
It's not, I don't think it's even, when it comes down to it, it's not even the fact that, you know, they even think that the government's wise or foolish.
Yeah.
It's more like they just don't even care to look into it.
So that's right. They're just very compliant.
Yeah.
Let's go with whatever's happening.
And I
It's
think
on
that's-
TV, Facebook, TikTok. It's all good, right?
And I think that's why there's, especially for some families, like
Yeah.
their parents are it's such a big thing because they're like, wake up, like you're that next generation.
Yes,
like,
and you've got nothing. We grew up with the hippie revolution, when everything was challenged and a government had to earn respect and favour because we didn't believe anyone and trust anyone, right? And for good reasons, okay? And now that's sort of faded out and the next generation just going along with the ride because enjoying the benefits of prosperity and abundance and everything's fine and not seeing past the surface, right? Yes, so, and that's been my observation. And yeah, so that's why I think that it's older people that are like the young people don't really have an issue with vaccine most of the time. They're just like governments always look after me. Medicine's like it's all good, right? Okay, so that's okay. Anyway, freedom. So there's nothing in Scripture really about government's limits on government's authority because governments are all bad in the Bible, right? You got that wrong. Now, Roman emperors and stuff, none of them are really good. So there's very little that talks about where needs the government step over its line. There's a few places you can draw out of it, but there's very little advice on what to do about it because this was written to people living under unjust, bad, ungodly governments. That's the advice to them. So we okay. Is there anything else important? How do we treat people? What are our main principles? Our main principles: one, we love God. We focus on the gospel. We do what Paul did.
Partiality.
We focus on what Paul did. We minister hope and life to people who are going through this, and they don't even have Jesus to give them a foundation, right? And so we carry love and grace. And we know there are all sorts of people who are completely confused and afraid. We've got a promise for the vaccine. They will drink deadly poisons and it will not harm them, right? So we can declare that over our families or whatever, and we can know God, we have that promise to stand on, and we can bring that hope and life to other people. I've handed out the thing from the ACC. That's an internal document for pastors of the ACC on what the ACC National thinks of COVID and their response. One of the things that's open for discussion in that, because every ACC church is independent, what happens, does your church mandate that people have to have the vaccine before they can come, right? Our church, Centrepoint, has decided, already articulated, that we are a church for everybody, vaccinated or unvaccinated, right? So anyone, we're not going to say you need to get a vaccine to come to church. We will not make it hard for the Gentiles to come to turn to God, right? That's that thing out of Acts from yesterday. And there's actually substance in that, because we understand, remember, that vaccinated or unvaccinated, both of you are bringing the COVID into my church, right? It's not making any difference, really. It's not making not a big enough difference to say you can't come. And so there's very little benefit. The only reason I would say to an unvaccinated person not to come is if they're vulnerable, immunodeficient, elderly, and there's currently an outbreak. I would recommend you don't come to church today, because the chances of you picking up COVID is probably 100%, and you can't handle it. So the main thing that I'm thinking about right now about COVID, I've got two people I'm thinking about who are the vulnerable people in my circle that I need to look after when the borders open and COVID comes through. And what am I going to do for them? Okay. So I've got elderly parents-in-law, okay, and I just figured out, this is another vaccine question, that they had the vaccine in August, right? So by the time the borders open, it will have basically stopped working, right? Because after 3 months, its efficiency drops by 20% every month or something like that, right? That's so I'm going to tell my parents-in-law to get a booster in January, right? So that by the time the borders are open, they'll be at their maximum defense because for elderly people, if you haven't got a vaccine, you're at high risk, right? And I've got a plan for them, okay, regardless of what you think of the vaccine. That's pretty much always been my thing. If there's an outbreak, I'd rather have a vaccine than not, right? Especially if you've got a high risk condition. My other concern is Calvary. Who knows Calvary? Calvary. Who knows Calvary? You know Calvary. Calvary, highly immunodeficient, highly vulnerable child with multiple heart conditions and stuff like this, right? Unable to be vaccinated. Cannot handle the vaccine because she's got immunodeficiency from her medication to stop her arthritis and other things, right? So, in her case, she's in a highly vulnerable state when the borders open, right? Because all these vaccinated people carrying COVID are going to be in her school, right? Where all the other 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds are going to get COVID and not even notice. And okay, she's going to be highly vulnerable to that. So that's a whole new ball game. How do we protect those people who vaccine isn't going to help them? That's a big deal. That's what I'm thinking about right now. Rather than concerning about my personal freedom, right? I'm concerned about how am I going to help the people that actually are going to be in trouble when COVID comes. Okay. I think the main thing, I had no idea where this class was going to go when I started it, but I just thought we should talk about it. Our main thing is what Paul did is our main thing. That's our main thing. We can get caught up in whether the government should or shouldn't, and
Oh, yeah.
we can write letters to the government and say we object, and we can protest about stuff in an honouring, respectful way, right? About mandatory vaccines, because it's legitimate for a Christian to have concerns about mandatory vaccines. But our main thing is to minister the gospel to people who are in more confusion and more fear and more stuff than ever before. And that's got to be what we want to take on mainly, and to love and respect and not buy into the polarization and the hostility that obviously is going around the world right now, where people are, this has become a thing that people fight about and argue about and are full of fear about. We've got to bring some stability and some hope into all of those people. Okay, I'm going to pray and we can stop. Thank you, Jesus. Father, I thank you for that scripture, Lord, that we will drink deadly poisons and it will not harm us. I thank you, you have given us all authority. We can tread on snakes and scorpions and nothing will harm us. I thank you, Jesus, that when darkness increases, when sin increases, grace increases more, light shines brighter, and we pray, even over our state in this coming season, Lord God, we ask for the grace and the glory of God to be so strong upon your church, that they would shine a greater light in the face of this great darkness. In Jesus' name, we give us huge amounts of wisdom. Let us be peacemakers and reconcilers and hope bringers, Lord, carriers of the gospel of hope and of healing to all of those around us. In Jesus' mighty name. And we pray for our government. Right now, we pray for Scott Morrison, and we pray for Mark McGowan. Lord, touch them, speak to them in their impossible dilemmas where they don't know what to do. Shine them a ray of wisdom and light that they can navigate through every situation. Lord God, give them the great wisdom, give them the right allies at the right times, and give them great discernment to know who to trust and who to stay clear of. In Jesus' name, bless our government. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Amen. This is the last session of ethics. This is the last session of college for 2021. This is a momentous moment. Let's sort our assignments out so we can be fully free. Take that burden off.
This week and next week is my last week.
Yes, awesome.
Let me do double your diplomas, right? Done that.
Nah,
You've got a few
I want
subjects to
you
go,
do
right?
Four subjects, maybe, sure.
Thank you, Kumar. Good to have you, mate.
Thank you. See you guys.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that by next year I should be all right on the ball, so.